All right, in this tutorial, we are going to look at basically how to get rid of things. And what I'd love to get rid of is this little hovery helpy thing. I accidentally opened one of the tutorial files. So what I want to do is I want to go to File and Open. And the file that I'm going to open is the Senju file that we've been using previously, just because you should already have that, or you can download it again. And it's got some nice things that we could potentially remove, and it shows some of the uses of some of the uses of the tools that we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Senju. And right, this is the uncolor corrected version. For this tutorial, it doesn't matter that it has not been color corrected. So let's get started. So what we're going to be focusing on is a lot of the stuff that we've done previously. We've selected things that we wanted to extract from an image, and then been able to paste them into new layers, create multiples, etc. So there's also times when you want to get rid of things. Now this can either be maybe the image has maybe it's an old photograph that you've scanned in and there's scratches on it or things like that. So there's tools that help you get rid of those kind of errors. There's also tools that will help you get rid of, like, let's say there's a lamppost in an image and you want it gone, or even like a road in a desert scene or something like that. There's tools now that will allow you to just eliminate things from an image. And most of the time it works pretty well. Sometimes it fails pretty spectacularly, but we're going to take a look at that and see how it works. So the tools we're going to be focusing on using today are, we're going to start, let me put them so they're in the right place. Okay, so really we're going to be focusing on the spot healing brush and the healing brush tool, the patch tool, this content aware move tool. We're also going to be focusing on the clone stamp tool. And so those are the two tools, plus one final way that we can use selection areas. And so those are the things we're going to start with. So what I'd like to talk about first is the content aware fill. So content aware fill is when you select something and you delete it, and when you delete it, you do something special so it doesn't just disappear. So let's go ahead and use the lasso tool to start with. You can just hit the letter L on the keyboard for the quick key for that. And to start with, let's say for some reason I don't want this little boat to be here any longer, right? I've decided that that's something that I really don't want in my scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just draw a little circle around it. And I went a little bit large there, so I'm actually going to hold down Option or Alt on the keyboard. I'm just going to click and drag to chop off this extra little lump, and that's just because I spazzed a little. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on the image just so you can see what happens. So now, by default, it should be set that if I hit delete on the background layer, this fill dialog pops up. If this does not pop up, there we can talk about how else to get here, right? But it should pop up, and it can either be set to the foreground color, which basically means, right, if I delete this, then in my case, magenta would show up here. The background color, I can choose a particular color. I can actually fill this with a pattern. There's this history. We're not going to talk about that right now. And you can also just do black, 50% gray, and white, right? So there's several options there. What we want is what is checkmarked currently for me, which is content aware. You may have foreground or background set. But go ahead and make sure you have content aware set, and check mark that color adaptation, blending mode's normal, opacity's 100%, right? So you can actually do this deletion in a way that's different. We're going to start by making it normal, and then we'll undo it and test some of the other options. So we just hit OK. It will take a little bit to figure it out, and then it disappears that boat. And so what it's doing is it's predicting where this landscape should be based on what's around it. And so in this case, it worked really, really well, right? If I hit Command D to deselect, right, you can't tell that there was a boat there or that there's been some change made in this image at all. It's sort of magical, in my opinion. If I hit Command or Control Z to undo this and Command or Control Z again to undo that, I'm going to go ahead and hit delete again. And so this brings up that same content-aware fill. And this time I'm going to just adjust the opacity to 50% and leave the mode to normal. And let's just see what happens. Right, so you can see it's made it look like this boat now is transparent, right? I can see that landscape now behind it, but it's not 100% opaque in the way that it's changed it. I'm going to go ahead and undo that and hit delete again, right? We're just going to go through a couple more. I'm going to bump this back up to 100%, and I'm going to do multiply to start with and just see what this looks like. And you can pause the tutorial at this point and just experiment with different options. And so you can kind of see the different ways that this blends. I have no idea why you would want to use that blend mode, but maybe if you set the opacity a little bit lower, like down to 50%, and did it, maybe it would look a little different. But right, there's no reason for me to do that, but there may be a cause. There's overlay. There's all sorts of other options that you have in terms of what this looks like. Okay, so that's content-aware fill, right? So that worked really well in that case. If I deselect that and say, oh, I want to get rid of this person on this horse down here on the bridge, and I select this, this is going to be a bit more problematic. If I go ahead and hit delete, and I'm going to set this back to normal and 100%, because that'll make it the easiest to see what's going on, and I hit OK, we'll see how it does. Right, so it didn't do a great job. In the water, it was pretty good, but it messed the bridge up something fierce, right? So this is one of those cases where that content-aware fill isn't really going to work the way that we would prefer it to work, right? So you can tell if there's too much going on, it's not really going to work. You need a reasonably uniform background. However, you can have like a seam between two different areas. Now, similarly, if we try and get rid of this big boat, let's go ahead and see what happens there if I hit delete. Okay. So that worked better, right? But it wasn't quite perfect. And the question will be, do I want to fix this section here? And are there ways to make that happen, right? But so sometimes it works really well and it's super fast, and other times it just doesn't work as well as we would like it to. In this case, I could come back in here with another tool and finish that off. So I'm going to undo that. We'll come back to that because we'll actually do the same thing, and then we'll use another tool to clean these things up. But I want to introduce you to a couple other options here. Okay, so you can experiment with selecting other things in the scene and seeing if you can get them to disappear. Like, I'm interested in... This is a nice image because it's got a lot of variety in terms of, places to test, right? And so this kind of goes away. I mean, granted, it might just be better to do a bigger selection area and get rid of, everything around here so it's just trees and bushes in there. That's something that would potentially be possible. All right, so this is one way to do content-aware selections and get things and disappear some things. So let's look at some of the other tools. So one of the other tools that's really, really handy is the spot healing brush, right? And this kind of shows what it does. If I go ahead and click on the spot healing brush, right, and make sure it's the spot healing brush and not just the healing brush tool. The spot healing brush is really simple. It basically gives you a brush. You have a couple options up here, right? And you can set the size and hardness, spacing, all of that. And so it allows you to just say, like, let's say I want to get rid of this black line here. So I can just click and drag over all of this. And it does a pretty good job getting rid of it. You'll note that there is some wiggliness here. So I might want to use a larger brush in this case. I might want to make this a little bit bigger so it more fully consumes this thing, right? Because that basically allows it to sample, and sampling is just like means it's grabbing the things around it to figure out what to turn this into. And so let's go ahead and try that. So, right, so I made a bigger brush that actually did a worse job because it pulled more from the shore than I wanted it to, right? And so the spot healing brush again, can work really well in certain cases. Let's go ahead and undo that and make the brush actually smaller. Let's go down to 73 pixels, right? And so if I click on this now and I just come in here and go a little tighter to this thing, maybe that'll do it. There we go, right? So I made the brush a little smaller. It selected from a smaller area around the edges, and it allowed this to happen. Now note that there are these types. There's content aware, create texture, and proximity match. We're not going to worry about create texture or proximity match at this point. You can experiment with those and see how they work, right? So I can get rid of things there. This is another spot where if I wanted to get rid of this edge in this mountain, I could probably pretty easily use the spot healing brush to disappear that, right? It goes away pretty easily with this tool. And you can see there's all these little dots, like, you know, ink dots and stuff. So I could come in here and I can just click on these and they will disappear, right? So it's a really nice way to work and to get things cleaned up and get little blemishes off. Okay, so let's say I want to remove something, but I have a very specific place from which I want to remove it. So let's say that in this case, where's a good spot? Let's say that I want to remove this figure here, right? And this is a tricky one because even if I use the spot healing brush, I'm going to probably have a pretty bad time too. Some of it might go away easily, but it's still left a little bit of, you know, some problem areas in there. So I'm going to undo that. Now I might use the spot healing brush, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a bit more. And note that there is this target that comes up, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I am going to see if I can just get rid of this person's legs pretty easily. Okay, I've gotten rid of their legs. The spot healing brush did that pretty well. And let's see if I can get rid of this. Now this is probably going to be, okay, that worked pretty well too. So now I'm getting to a point where there's some other areas that I need to be able to get rid of stuff, but you can see it's going to start causing problems, right? It's not going to work as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change to the healing brush tool, and we'll see how this works. So the healing brush tool works similarly. However, what you do is you hold down Option to choose where you want the brush to draw from, right? And so let's say I want to be able to do this cross piece here. So I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm just going to click to set the point that I'm sampling from. And then you can see that this now has that spot, and wherever I'm sampling from, when I click here, it will sample from there, and it'll basically draw a line along that follows the move of my brush. So if I click this and I, you know, kind of go through this person's head, right, I can kind of get that fixed up. And you'll see that, you know, I might want to do, you know, a couple rounds. You can see that some other things are coming in and it's not perfect, right? But the healing brush tool is one of the ways that I can work. And in this case, I might want to actually have a bigger brush in order to get a better go of this. And you can see that if you know, it's usually best to go as close to where you're starting as possible. So if I come here and just click once, right, you can see that it's not quite all the way there. And I just want to make sure, yeah, I have everything set normal up top. But I can go ahead and click a few more times in here, and I can start to get that run through. Now there's still some haze left over from the person's head and stuff like that, but I can go ahead and fix those things here in a bit. So I can hold down Option again to select this area. I can come down here and, you know, I can either click and drag to draw, or I can just click singular times to come in and give myself just a touch more control in terms of how this is going. Now, for this vertical part, I may just want to come all the way over here and actually probably select a little bit lower, like right here in the middle, right? And then I can just line this up with the other one and start to go. Now you'll see it does take, right, a couple ticks to do that, and you know, you can see it's a more time-consuming process. I'm going to undo several of those steps, and I want to show you another tool that's very similar, but just works a little bit differently than the spot healing brush, and that's the clone stamp tool. So the clone stamp tool is really good at doing this, but it does a much more effective job, and you can kind of see in the detail there how it goes. Now, one of the nice things about the healing, the clone stamp tool, is you have a pretty wide range of brushes you can use. I'm going to go ahead and just go back to soft round, which is, I believe, the default brush. If your hardness is higher, just lower it. And I'm going to go ahead and make the brush a little bigger. And right, with this, I have the ability to control my opacity, my flow. There's a lot of different things you can do. And note that there's this option to sample the current and below. What that means is if I have like a multi-layer image and I want to be sampling, say I've cut out a sailboat and I've put one right here, and I want to be able to like sample this and the boat and migrate things over, I can do that with all the layers that are happening here. I can also say all layers or just link it to the current layer. So this tool works almost identical to the clone tool. So I can go ahead and click over here somewhere, and I can come in and just paint right through this. Now you'll see that I'd say it does a significantly better job. The other thing it does is it tracks. So the clone brush always returns to the point that I selected, whereas the rubber stamp tracks with the brush. So what it does is, like, let's say I select this chunk of the bridge over here, and then I move it over here. As soon as I click to start drawing, then the distance, it keeps that distance between the brush head and the point that I sampled, right? So as I move up, here, let me go ahead and just drop this here. So we're just going to go ahead and click once there. But you'll see that as I go top forward, what it's doing is, you can see that crosshair down there is tracking with my brush, right? So now it's linked to that. So you can see now that I've let off the mouse button, it's actually going through, and wherever, it looks like her face is there. So I'm just drawing a little bit further over from where I was in the scene originally. And so this tool can be really great for doing things like this, because it doesn't bounce back. It maintains that relationship. And that's the big difference between the healing brush tool and the clone stamp tool. Otherwise, they're functionally pretty similar. And then just to reset things, right, you just hold down Option, click, and then you can set things. And again, it's probably better to come from this side and just, right, come through here. And what's nice now is I can come up, and I can just come over and get rid of all of that interior space. I can also, right, come down and get rid of more of this body. And then I can hold down Option, click over here, come over here, and click and drag. And so you can see that sometimes it's easy to get rid of things, and sometimes it's really tricky. And, with some of this, I might want to, with some of this, I might want to go ahead and just bring in here. And, I've made a few mistakes here. I would, if I was not doing this right now, I would undo it, and I would clean some of that up, or I'd grab another spot here and try and fix it. But you can see that, you get the idea, right? If I did a better job while I was talking, you can disappear somebody and not notice that they're gone. So, right, so I started with the simplest way, which is that content-aware fill, and then we went to something more challenging. So let's look at somewhere over here. Like, let's say we want, all of these trees to be over here, right? So first, I should probably make my brush significantly larger. And so this is one option, is to use the, use this to come in here, and I can just, have the forest completely, and sometimes it's good to have multiple samples that you work from. Right, so you'll notice that I started down low, and then I grabbed some from the canopy of the trees, And now that I've got all of this, I can just come in here and continue to hide all of those things. Now you'll note that I did hit the edge here, and I went over. One of the things that you can use a selection area for is to create boundaries on what you're affecting. So if I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to impact that edge at all, what I can do is I can take my rectangular marquee tool, line it up. I'm just going close to the edge. I could zoom in and make it a little bit more precise, but I can just go like this, and then I can take my clone stamp tool, and I can hold down Option to, find somewhere here in the canopy and just come over here and start to draw. And then when I come up to that edge, you'll note that, right, the impact is limited to wherever my selection area happens to be. And you'll note that I made a little mistake there, so I'm going to undo that, which, because I was using one brush stroke for that whole thing, it set something up. Okay, so you can see that, I'm leaving a little bit in there. There's some roof lines that I could come in and fix if I wanted to later. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect that. Okay, so, right, so that's another way we can work. And then finally, there is, let's use our rectangular marquee tool, and let's go ahead and grab this little banner that's here, right? It's a little block of text. So I'm going to hold down Command, and there we go. Scroll. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just select around this shape. And so one of the final tools I want to show you is available under the clone or the healing brush tool and the spot healing brush tool. And there's the patch tool and the content aware move tool. The red eye tool, if you have images with people with red eyes, we can talk about it, but it's pretty rare to use at this point because most cameras and most things fix that automatically. So I'm going to go to the patch tool to start with. And what the patch tool does is it allows you to choose whether this is the source or the destination, whether or not to use a pattern, which I don't want to do, right? So the patch, you can say normal or content aware, and it says source or destination, and then there's this transparent. So what the heck does that mean? So first, let's just go ahead and click and drag this thing, and you'll see kind of what it means, right? In this case, what I can do is I can basically pull over and use the area next to this to fill this in and hide that. So that's one option. If I switch this from source to destination, which I know is really hard to see, and click and drag this, now what it does is it basically creates a copy of this and pastes it in. But you'll notice that it doesn't quite do it. It actually kind of blends it with whatever's underneath a little bit, right? So in that way, the patch tool is a little different. So I'm going to undo that. If I check mark transparent and click and drag, right, you'll see that it shows a lot more of what's underneath. A lot of that texture comes through. So this could be a really useful tool. And what would be kind of interesting is if we do multiple steps, right, it's going to get more and more coarse. But there's, so this is, this is another potential way to work to clean things up. So let's look at, so we've done the patch, we've set it to normal. Let's do content aware. If I click and drag, it will, do basically the same thing, but it uses the content aware algorithms to do a better job matching the edges of this object. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. And then the structure and the color, honestly, I don't know. These are newer settings that I don't know what they do, and maybe we can talk about that in a future tutorial once I've played with it a little bit more. Okay, so the other option is the content aware move tool, which again, basically allows us to move this, and it allows us to do, actually gives us scaling tools, and rotation and things like that. So we can actually both transform and move the tool, right? And you can see it actually extracts it from where it was, and allows us to change the rotation, scale, size, and then it plops it in wherever we decided to put it, which is pretty amazing. And this is a good example that works well, right? Again, if we were to circle this boat and try and do this, we probably wouldn't have the same the same amount of success with that, right? In this case, it would be better to select this boat, copy and paste it to a new layer, and use that as a way to position it around the scene. But these are just a range of tools. And it's, the clone stamp tool, I would say, is the one that is the most versatile. But these other ones, like, try the ones that are simplest first. And if those don't work, then you can go to the more tools that take more time to execute what you're trying to do. Right. But so there's a lot you can do with these tools. And so that's really the basics of how to use this wonderful set of tools to remove things.